Thank you. Well, I think you'll agree, 4 really intense and powerful speeches we've had. They've had their say, rather. Now it's going to be time for you to have your say. Before we do that, I want to give you the result of the pre-vote. This was your vote based, as I said before, you'd been stirred by these powerful speeches. Those of you who were for the motion that, yes, indeed, the best chance for peace is for Uncle Sam to butt out, 243. Those against, 163. But the don't knows almost in front on 212 don't knows. So that's the swing voters that you've got to play for. Both sides will be competing for those 212 and to get people to change sides. What we're going to do now in our remaining 30 minutes or so is most of it is going to be taken over to contributions, questions, etc. from you, which I'm going to bring back here for responses from the panel. I'm going to take them in groups of 3. I'll come to you as many of you as I can. Let's hear from you.
Yes, well, certainly I lost my mind. I don't know which one to support. But one thing, you presented, Mr. Cohen, you presented an excellent case in a way. But just one simple question. Last week, a bus in the West Bank taking students, young kids, going into the road, the winding roads and so on, while there is a separate settlers road, as you know. That bus has turned down and the tragedy was losing, I can't remember how many kids.
Come directly to the question if you can, just because there's so many.
The question is, would the United States be able at least to persuade Israel to open these roads to Palestinians?
Thank you. You're going to be next after we've heard from you, yes. Yeah. And I will include people.
I'm going to ask the against side of the table, how would they feel about any outcome of any discussion being brokered with the United States being in between? I mean, Jeremy, you mentioned that it's like a divorce situation and you need to have a mediator. Isn't this like having your mother-in-law mediating that divorce? I mean, you...
Thank you. We got it.
Speaking in pragmatic terms, I'd just like to know exactly how does J Street work to change the dynamics? What is it doing that gives you hope that the Congress and all the players will have a more realistic and more beneficial influence on the process?
Thank you. And before we get answers here, does anybody have a question for this side of the table? You do there. So why don't we just hear your question, then we're going to get answers straight away. Yeah.
I just said that I normally agree with Dr. Mustafa Barghouti on many points, but I wasn't sold on his argument today. The reason is, I think that Dr. Mustafa said that we can't continue going back to the United States when we keep failing. But I think we even stuck with the grassroots approach for even longer than we stuck with the United States, and we failed just as much. The Palestinians have appealed and worked on the grassroots strategy for as long as I can remember. And in fact, if anything, it feels like people are getting more exhausted. And I can't see how the support of grassroots around the world could translate into policy for the Palestinians. But on the other side, if you don't mind, I just had one question for the other side.
It has to be so brief because they've already got plenty to get through.
Yes, but just I understand what you're saying, but I've just come back from Washington where I attended a conference where people from the White House spoke. And they were very adamant to communicate to us that the Palestinian issue is not a priority in the end, although they understand and support all of the views that I think this table shares, but also, and more importantly, that the United States will never, ever use punitive measures against Israel. And I cannot see how they could really then achieve anything.
Thank you. I think we have got the message there. Let's go with you, Jeremy Ben-Ami, first. Why don't you pick up that last point? Can you imagine the White House ever really, wielding the stick on Israel, given what the ladies just mentioned there? And how does J Street change the dynamics of American politics? That was the question over there.
Well, I think what's needed is there has to be pressure on both sides. I think that if you have a one-sided approach with a stick, let's say, being wielded against only one party, that party isn't going to respond in the way that we all want. And there's Palestinian recalcitrance as well, and there are issues that need to be raised with both sides. So I'd like to see the United States not be the mother-in-law. I would like to see the United States step back and be more of the even-handed arbiter in this conflict, and that is a change from the road of failure in the past. And to answer the question over here on my left, the way that is going to happen is when the political space in the United States is created, that a United States president and the foreign policy-making team feel that they can act in that kind of a way, and that is...
And for people who are not ultra familiar with J Street, just in a sentence or two, just give us a sense of what it is J Street does to change this dynamic.
The most important thing is to organize and bring together particularly Jewish Americans who recognize that Israel's interest is in achieving a two-state solution, and we intervene in the political process the way that you're allowed to in the United States, which is we endorse candidates who support a two-state solution and active American leadership and a change from this route of failure, and we raise money for them. And this is a new voice in the American political dialogue, and it's going to change the balance of the considerations that are in the political process.
Thank you. And Mustafa Barghouti, the question that came to you was, okay, the US approach has been tried a long time, but so has grassroots action, and that too has not borne fruit.
As a matter of fact, this question illustrates my point, because the only time when we could change parameters was when we did grassroots uprising in the first Intifada. And that was the only reason why there was a peace process. But the problem is that we were all deviated from continuing the struggle by the so-called Oslo process. And after 20 years, we all see today what Oslo led to. There was a transformation. The PLO, instead of being a leader of national liberation movement and care about the people at the grassroots, they were all engaged in diplomatic acts. And eventually what we got today is nothing. If there is, I don't think I need to convince you about the power of grassroots. All you need to do is to look around you and see what people could do in Tunisia and in Egypt. The mass popular resistance is proving to be the most effective way. And that's why we should stick to it, and we should increase it, and we should repeat the best traditions of what we did in 1987 and then we were deviated from.
Thank you very much. Before we go back for more questions, Roger Cohen, just address the point that was made very forcefully there, that if you talked about Israel being America being Israel's lawyer. The question said, it's like Israel's having your mother-in-law there for a mediation dispute. How, given that there's been this long past of America being, in your phrase, the lawyer for Israel, how does that change? And perhaps say a word to the lady who's saying America hasn't even persuaded Israel to open up these settler-only roads to buses, etc.
Well, yes, if I could start with the roads, I think, yes, the United States and its partners should certainly be able to get Israel to open roads that are closed, remove roadblocks, and generally facilitate life for Palestinians who want to go about their business and family lives on the West Bank. But that's not enough. We're not really talking here about practicalities. We are talking about we are talking about non-citizens. The people on the West Bank are non-citizens. This is unacceptable and corrosive to Israel. And the United States needs to be firm in saying, and consistent in saying, that settlement activity, settlement expansion has to stop. I believe that a second-term president in the changing environment in the Middle East and the changing domestic environment can be firmer, more effective, and more persuasive toward Israel in persuading it to do what is ultimately in Israel's self-interest, that is, arrive at a two-state solution.
Thank you. William, do you want to get in very quickly, but I do want to go back as soon as I can. Very quickly.
Yes, I just wanted to pick up on the point that Roger was making about the West Bank. Salam Fayyad is a man who's the Prime Minister in the West Bank who's been imposed upon the Palestinians by the United States. The United States have created in the West Bank a one-party state which brutally tortures its political opponents and is much like a Mubarak state from the past. It's a state which has rejected democracy, and that's what the United States has been behind. So the whole idea that the United States is trying to do good work in the West Bank and maybe can push a bit further is absurd. The United States policy in the West Bank is one that supports occupation and isn't likely ever to end it.
Is Gaza any more democratic, do you think?
I don't think Gaza is particularly more democratic, but at least its government were the people who won the election, which is, in some senses, better than nothing.
All right. Let's hear some other voices. I want to get people in. You'll have another chance, I promise. Let's hear. People have been waiting very patiently. You're all up there, and wave at me down here if I can.
Hello. Yeah. Could I ask William Seacar, please? If the US were to butt out, what does he think is the answer to finding a peaceful resolution to this issue?
Thank you.
Hang on, not yet. We're taking a group, 2 or 3. Yeah, you're the next. Yeah.
This question is directed to the group against the motion. How do you expect the U.S. to take a more unbiased approach with lobbyist powers such as AIPAC holding so much influence?
I guess my question counters the gentleman's question over there, and it's directed at William or Mustafa, and that is the level of financing that does go into pro-Israeli lobby. I guess where would you see that funding going if you cut that off? I would think that it might go to increasing the amounts of settlements, and I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you. And the person who's got the microphone, you should already have it. Oh, it's up there. Okay, I thought there was a woman here who had it. You go ahead, yeah.
This is for Mr. Cohen. About the changing attitude of Jewish people, Jewish Americans, liberal Jewish Americans, and I agree with you, there is a change. But what do you say? I think the driving force now is the evangelical voice in America, the Christian right. So what do you say to that? Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. I'm going to try one more round before we have summing up speeches. Sorry for this moment. We're going to have to pause it for now because we've got to hear some responses. That was 4 I took there. My rule was meant to be 3. Roger Cohen, you had a question directly. You've been talking about Jewish American opinion. What about Christian evangelicals?
Well, you're right, madam. The evangelical right is there, and for its own bizarre reasons is an ardent and uncritical supporter of Israel, and that combined with AIPAC, creates this situation in Congress where you get a prime minister, an Israeli prime minister, who has done nothing to advance peace, getting 29 standing ovations. The essential quality of the United States is, however, its fluidity. It's a nation that constantly shifts, reinvents itself. Who would have imagined Barack Obama in the White House? So, there will be further shifts. Jeremy and I have tried to describe some of them among the American Jewish community, which are beginning to change that balance of forces. And I think as the price the United States pays for the continuation of this conflict becomes clearer and clearer, that shift will continue. So I think even the evangelicals can be circumvented over time.
Thank you. And William, it was put directly to you. If the US did butt out, what is your path to a peaceful solution?
Well, Roger and Jeremy have tried to persuade us that there's no alternative to the United States, and in the end we'll bring round that big ship and finally it's going to come into harbour and deliver a peace. My argument is the other way around, actually, which is that if the United States butted out, if it ended its tax breaks for US citizens in delivering money to Israel in its settlement building, if it threatened or even did remove its massive financial support for Israel, and if it removed its diplomatic support in the United Nations, what would happen? Well, first of all, at the moment, the occupation is free for Israel. There would be a genuine, enormous financial cost for Israel in sustaining the occupation, one I don't suspect that it could continue carrying on. Secondly, in the United Nations and in all the international bodies, a process of delegitimization of Israel as a result of this occupation would begin. People would threaten to take Israel out of the World Cup, out of the Eurovision Song Contest, out of all the kinds of things that Israeli citizens would
start. Now you've gone too far, William, really. I mean, this is, until now, it was all fine.
But there would be a genuine cost to this occupation to Israelis, to ordinary Israelis, and they would start to see, and they would start to get active with their own politicians, and they would want to see some change. It's the protection of Israel, it's the subsidy for the occupation to make the occupation free. It's the fact that there are no diplomatic, political or economic costs whatsoever that is continuing to keep this conflict and this occupation going.
Thank you. Jeremy Benamir, a question specifically mentioned AIPAC. How do you turn this around given the strength of that organization?
Well, I think the problem that has happened in American politics is that a small group of people, smaller group of people in the American Jewish community have purported to speak for the entirety of the American Jewish people in the political process. We see consistently that majorities of Jewish Americans actually favor a two-state solution. They oppose the settlements. They want the U.S. to be more engaged. But that's not what American leaders have been hearing from the representatives of Jewish Americans in the political process. So we have been, my community, misrepresented, and our voice has essentially been hijacked by a set of leadership that is out of touch with our community. So the work of J Street is to try to shift that and to make sure that a voice is given into the political process, into the policy process, that would allow a president to do the types of things that Roger outlined in his remarks, that I think is the only route that actually would lead to a two-state resolution.
Thank you. And the last one for you, Mustafa. The questioner said, if America did butt out, isn't there a risk that some of that pro-Israel funding would actually go to settlements and you'd still have a problem?
Well, believe me, there is enough funding for both of them. Unfortunately, a lot of money is coming to the settlements from the United States, from private funding in the United States. And I think the funding that is going to keep the Congress in the pocket of Mr. Netanyahu is even more dangerous, because it is neutralizing the only factor that could stop Israel from expanding settlements. Actually, the money that is given to the lobby of the Congress is complementing the money that is given to the settlers to expand their settlements, and both of them are destroying the future. I just wanted to make one comment about something that was said before, just to make things clear. There is no justification of any violations of human rights or democratic rights, whether in the West Bank or Gaza. This should not happen neither here nor there. And that's why we are struggling very hard to get back Palestinian unity, so that we can get back what we lost, which is Palestinian democracy, and get back the role of a Palestinian elected parliament, which was marginalized because of this internal division. So this is very important. Finally, I think the fact that the United States is incapable of playing a positive role here because of the situation today should actually encourage all of us to work for an alternative. And the alternative is an alliance between us, not to have half step or half solution, or remain in the same tunnel that we are all in today, but to open a new road. And that road is to struggle together against this system of oppression.
Thank you. In the next 3 minutes, what I'm going to do, though, is just round up a few more thoughts and contributions. They're not going to be answered directly, but hopefully the speakers might bear some of them in mind. And I'm just literally, just going to try and cram them in. As brief as you are, the better. So let's just start with you, if you've got a microphone there. There we are. As brief as you can, so we can cram some in, and then it's going to be you. Yeah.
Yes, it occurred to me that it doesn't seem that any of you are actually disagreeing about anything. If the US changed course, then they should be in the process. But I wanted to get some idea of, in particular, why Roger and Jeremy felt that there was a change in liberal Jewish opinion, and what that barometer was. What was your measurement for?
Okay, perhaps one of them will do that in their closing remarks. Whoever's got the microphone next is there. Yeah.
Hi. I recently did some work with Israelis and Palestinians in Jerusalem, and they were university students, and we got them to debate with one another about the future of peace. And not one of them, in any of their speeches, mentioned the US or the international community. And likewise, nobody on the panel has mentioned the wishes of the Palestinian people or the Jewish people. And I think both of those things are kind of representative of the arrogance that we in the West have to think that we can solve it.
I think there was quite a lot about the wishes of the Palestinian Jewish people from both sides, actually, unless I misheard what I've been hearing. Let's get you as brief as you can, and then pass it to him, and then we'll come to you in between. Yeah. And this is going to be it, I'm afraid, yeah.
I just wanted to question, basically, the role of Hamas in the future of any sort of negotiations or anything. My first question was, how can you consider Hamas to be part of a unity government when they still refuse to accept any Israeli state, and how you think they'll act? And my second point was, I find it a little bit of a startling proposition to think that the motivations for this, the position Israel takes is financially motivated, when we know there's so much suffering going on in the West Bank and Gaza. It's quite a monstrous idea to think it's quite financial, and that's the main motivation.
Thank you. Brief as you can, up there.
Yes. I'm very worried today. Mahmoud Abbas said, that there's no Jewish history at all. We know for 3,300 years. He said it's just all fairy tales. And the incitement, the inflammatory language, that children are being taught, calling Jews pigs and dogs. The young children, the education aspect, and the saying there's no Israel on the map. And also, they have no history. Absolutely they do. The exile is finished, the captivity is finished. They do have a history. I believe God has brought them back. So those three issues.
Thank you. Incitement is the sort of catch-all term for that. And this will have to be the last voice, I'm afraid. Whoever's got the microphone here. Here, yes. You waited very patiently. That's why I'm responding.
Yes, I think both sides seem to think that the United States is compromised in its efforts to date. What I think we in Europe think is, why is it that the United States has to run this show? Why can't somebody else be involved? And what is wrong with Europe, which is an economic power to be reckoned with? It's got some forces. Why cannot Europe participate in this alongside the United States if necessary?
Roger Cohen said, have you been reading the newspapers? But, okay, I'm going to make sure you get an answer to that question.